They say the Victorians were obsessed with rules. Rules for dress, rules for dinner, even rules for how tightly you should lace your corset. But what if you suddenly woke up and discovered that you weren't just any Victorian? You were a spinster. An unmarried woman in a world where marriage was considered your one and only job description? Tonight, let's take you there. Fluff your pillows, dim the gaslight, and imagine this. You open your eyes not in your bedroom, but in a drafty London townhouse. The wallpaper is peeling, the coals in the fireplace are nearly out, and your bed is narrow, because no husband ever shared it. You are now a Victorian spinster, a woman of a certain age, unmarried, unwanted by society's rigid standards, and yet somehow expected to embody both dignity and quiet usefulness. The city outside is rumbling with horses, clattering carts, and a faint fog drifting through the window cracks. You hear the shrill cry of a milkman, the rattle of coal delivery boys, and down the street, a costermonger shouting about fresh eels. But here, in your narrow bed, you're already facing the peculiar reality of spinsterhood. No husband, no children, and the constant reminder that society thinks you're, well, just a little bit odd. And so begins your day. You rise slowly because spinsters are supposed to move with measured dignity. The floorboards creak under your feet and you reach for your morning dress, plain, dark-coloured and deliberately unfashionable. Married women might flaunt lace, ribbons and colours. Widows might drape themselves in theatrical black. But you're expected to fade quietly into the background, modest as a shadow in the corner. You wash your face with cold water from a ceramic jug, staring at yourself in a slightly warped mirror. A spinster's hair is always neat, no wild curls, no flirtatious ringlets. You pin it tightly back, the hairpins clinking like the sound of a tiny prison gate closing. Downstairs, breakfast is thin porridge with a crust of bread. You're not wealthy. Most spinsters aren't. Instead of being supported by a husband's income, you live off a small allowance, perhaps sent reluctantly by a brother, or scraped together by giving music lessons, mending linen, or doing genteel secretarial work for a local vicar. As you sip weak tea, you hear your neighbours gossiping through the thin walls. They whisper the word spinster as if it's a diagnosis. In their minds, it means you failed at the one thing you were meant to do, marry and reproduce. And yet, there's a peculiar freedom in it, isn't there? No husband to control your money. No babies to scream through the night. No endless pregnancies or risk of dying in childbirth like so many of your friends. You're poor, yes, but you're also alive. Still, society will never let you enjoy this freedom without shame. By mid-morning, you put on your shawl and step outside. The fog curls around your boots as you walk past butcher shops, pawn shops, and rows of narrow houses. Young girls giggle and point. An old man tips his hat, but not in respect, more in pity. To be unmarried at your age is to wear an invisible badge of disgrace. And yet, as the church bells toll in the distance, you wonder, perhaps the world is wrong about you. Perhaps spinsterhood is not a failure at all, but a strange kind of victory. By noon the fog has thickened and the damp clings to your shawl. A proper Victorian spinster must always be seen in society, but never too much. It's a delicate balance. You can't vanish completely, or the neighbours will say you've gone peculiar, but neither can you appear too lively, for fear of being accused of desperation. So, you take a slow walk toward the parish hall, umbrella in hand, boots clicking against wet cobblestones. Along the way you pass a row of shop windows, milliners displaying feathered hats, jewellers glittering with lockets and brooches. You pause for a moment admiring a necklace before remembering that such things are not meant for you. They are tokens of love, of courtship, of anniversaries. A spinster buys no jewels. She inherits them second-hand or not at all. At the parish you join a circle of other unmarried women, some older, some younger, all wearing the same air of stiff politeness. Together you sew garments for the poor, roll bandages for the sick, and drink lukewarm tea while listening to the vicar drone on about Christian duty. The work is good, but the glances aren't. Married women often look at you with a mix of suspicion and pity, as if spinsterhood might be contagious. A young bride might clutch her baby tighter in your presence, silently thanking God she has been spared your fate. After the sewing circle, you sometimes offer piano lessons to children of the middling classes. The piano is worn, its ivory keys yellowed, but your fingers still know their way across a hymn or a polite waltz. The children fidget and yawn, their mothers sitting nearby to ensure no spinsterly eccentricities rub off on them. It is not glamorous work, but it keeps a trickle of coins in your purse. Enough for coal, perhaps even enough for a better cut of meat once a week. By mid-afternoon, you return home to your small room. You light the fire, which sputters reluctantly, and pour yourself another weak cup of tea. The streets outside are alive with noise, delivery carts rattling past, children shrieking, distant cries from costermongers selling chestnuts and ribbons, and yet here you are, enclosed in your own quiet world. You take out a book, maybe a well-worn volume of poetry, or a tattered copy of a novel, perhaps even something daring, like the latest by the Bronte sisters, or Dickens, whose heroines often remind you uncomfortably of your own position in life. Some spinsters find escape in reading, others in writing little diaries no one will ever see. You scratch a few lines into your notebook, thoughts about the fog, the loneliness, and the way society seems determined to measure your worth by the ring you never received. And then there is tea time, that grand Victorian ritual. In the homes of married ladies, it is a bustling event with fine china, sponge cakes, and lively chatter. In your room, it is simpler. A chipped teacup, perhaps a stale biscuit softened in the steam, but you savour it nonetheless. For though society pities you, there is a strange peace in this solitude. No husband's temper, no endless children tugging at your skirts. Only you, your tea, and the faint ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. And as the gas lamps begin to glow in the misty street outside, you prepare for the long evening ahead, the loneliest, yet perhaps the most revealing part of a spinster's day. Evening settles over London like a heavy velvet curtain, the fog outside thickening until even the street lamps glow like blurred halos. You draw the curtains in your narrow room, careful to block out drafts, and strike a match to light the small oil lamp on your table. Its glow is soft, golden, and almost too intimate, as if the light itself knows how rarely anyone sits across from you. Dinner is a modest affair. A little bread, perhaps some cheese, or if the week has been kind, a slice of cold mutton saved from Sunday. Married women dine in company. Spinsters dine in silence. The soundscape of your meal is nothing but the creak of your chair, the occasional pop of the fireplace, and the muffled clatter of neighbours through the thin walls. Somewhere, a baby wails. Somewhere else, a couple argues. You chew slowly and think, sometimes with relief, sometimes with envy, how those sounds do not belong to your household. After dinner comes the evening ritual, sewing, darning, mending. A spinster's hands are never idle. By the lamplight, you stitch socks worn thin by endless walks, patch a fraying shawl, or rehem the same black dress you've worn for years. Each stitch is both practical and symbolic, holding together not just cloth, but the dignity of a life lived without applause. Sometimes, if fortune smiles, you are invited to a small social call. The vicar's wife might hold a reading of moral essays, or a neighbour might host a gathering of ladies of refinement. You attend with polite smiles, though you know your presence is tolerated rather than celebrated. At these gatherings, younger girls are encouraged to display themselves like flowers at market, husbands-to-be scanning them with the silent eyes of investors. You, the spinster, stand on the edge, offering help with the tea service or keeping watch over the coats. No one looks at you twice. No one asks for your hand in a dance. And yet, sometimes, you catch the eye of another unmarried woman across the room, and in that brief flicker, there is a silent camaraderie, a quiet recognition. We are not entirely alone. Returning home, you climb the narrow stairs, the boards groaning under your steps. Your room smells faintly of coal dust and lavender water. You undress by lamplight, carefully folding your plain garments, and slip into a nightdress patched at the seams. Before extinguishing the lamp, you sit for a moment on the edge of the bed. This is the hour of quietest honesty. No neighbours watching, no clergyman judging, no family whispering. Only you, your thoughts, and the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. Some spinsters pray at this hour, asking God why he left them unmarried, or thanking him for sparing them the pain of childbirth and endless duty. Others simply sit and think of what might have been. Perhaps you imagine the suitors who never came, or wonder about the man you once saw smile at you on a railway platform years ago, before vanishing forever into the smoke of the train. You blow out the lamp. The room sinks into darkness, and the noises of the city, carriage wheels, the bark of dogs, the faint hum of voices, seem to press against the window. You pull the thin blanket up to your chin. The mattress is lumpy, the air damp, but it is yours. You close your eyes, not as anyone's wife or mother, but as yourself, a Victorian spinster, solitary yet strangely resilient, forgotten by society yet surviving on your own terms. And as sleep finally begins to steal over you, there's a small, defiant thought that rises like a spark in the dark. Maybe spinsterhood is not a curse at all, but the beginning of something freer, quieter, and perhaps even stronger. For all the pity and whispers society heaps upon you, there is another life no one sees, a hidden one, stitched between the hours of duty and silence. To the outside world you are a harmless maiden lady, too plain to attract a husband, too quiet to matter. But behind closed doors, spinsters often discovered something extraordinary. Themselves. Take your books, for example. By daylight you display pious devotionals and moral essays on the parlour shelf. But tucked in a drawer, wrapped in a handkerchief, there lies something far more daring. A volume of Byron's poetry, or even a novel judged unsuitable for respectable women. When the lamp burns low and no one is there to scold, you open those pages and let your imagination roam where your body never could. Windswept moors, passionate declarations, heroines who defy society's chains. For a moment, you cease to be the overlooked spinster. You are a heroine in your own story. Then there are the small eccentric hobbies, the ones that keep your soul from shrinking. Some spinsters took up sketching, filling notebooks with landscapes and faces glimpsed on foggy streets. Others collected pressed flowers, labelling them with a precision that rivaled professional botanists. Some even mastered languages, quietly teaching themselves French or Latin with borrowed books, because no husband was there to forbid it. In these pursuits, you find freedom. Nobody notices what you do in solitude, and so you can pursue whatever sparks your mind. There is also the curious fact that spinsters became the keepers of family memory. Relatives may dismiss you in public, but in private they rely on you to write letters, preserve photographs, and pass down recipes. You are the silent archivist of a family that pretends you are irrelevant, yet depends on your devotion more than it dares to admit. And then there are friendships. Close, enduring bonds between unmarried women, sometimes so deep and intimate that they became known as Boston marriages later in history. Two women choosing to live together, pooling resources, offering one another companionship in a world that offered none. Society pretended not to notice, or dismissed it as innocent. But for many spinsters, these friendships were lifelines. In those whispered conversations and shared cups of tea, you find laughter, warmth, and a sense of belonging that no marriage contract could guarantee. Even your solitude itself is a rebellion. Married women are consumed by duty, birthing child after child, enduring the authority of husbands, managing endless domestic demands. You, as a spinster, endure poverty, mockery, and social dismissal. But you also enjoy something rare in the Victorian world: control over your own time. Your evenings, however lonely, are yours. Your earnings, however meagre, are yours. Your body, though judged as wasted, belongs to you alone. It is a quiet defiance, this life of a Victorian spinster. Not a loud revolution, not something that makes the newspapers. But in the hush of your room, in the books you read, in the letters you write, in the friendships you nurture, you are quietly carving out a space that belongs only to you. And in this, perhaps, lies the hidden truth. Though the Victorians mocked spinsters as failures, some of the freest women of the age were precisely those who never walked down the aisle. History books rarely pause to mention the spinster. They write of queens, of mothers of great men, of wives who upheld dynasties. The unmarried woman, quiet, grey, living in a rented room, is almost always left out, and yet her presence was everywhere, like the unseen mortar holding up the bricks of Victorian society. Spinsters became teachers when respectable wives could not. They filled schoolrooms with chalk dust and the sound of children reciting their lessons, shaping minds that would go on to govern the next century. Others became governesses, whispering Latin declensions and Bible verses into the ears of young aristocrats, their knowledge vast, their pay meagre, but their influence profound. Some spinsters turned to charity, not as fashionable gestures, but as lifelong vocations. They ran orphanages, taught the poor, visited prisons, or nursed the sick during epidemics. Free from husbands and children, they poured themselves into work that few others dared to take on. In the margins of history, many of the nameless women saving lives during cholera outbreaks or teaching factory children to read were, in fact, spinsters. And then there is the cultural legacy. By quietly existing outside the marriage system, spinsters revealed its cracks. They embodied the truth that a woman could live without a husband, could survive, even thrive, without male protection. This was radical, even if they never spoke the word. Later, feminists would look back at these women and recognize them as the first accidental pioneers, proof that independence was possible, even in an age that despised it. In literature, too, their shadow lingers. Think of the sharp-tongued aunts in Dickens, the mysterious governesses in the Brontes, the lonely women who hover at the edge of Victorian novels. They are not simply characters, they are echoes of real women who haunted drawing rooms and schoolhouses, their lives both tragic and quietly heroic. And perhaps that is the final truth. The Victorian spinster was never truly powerless. She lived in the cracks of society, overlooked and mocked, but it was precisely in those cracks that she carved out space for resilience, for intelligence, for quiet rebellion. Without fanfare, without applause, she carried the weight of classrooms, charities, parishes and families who depended on her while pretending not to. So when you close your eyes tonight, imagining yourself as a Victorian spinster, remember this. She may not have been celebrated, but she endured. She may not have been a wife or mother, but she left behind classrooms of children who could read, charities that kept the poor alive, and a whisper of freedom that would one day grow into a louder demand. And that, in its own way, is a legacy, not of failure, but of survival, quiet strength, and the strange, stubborn dignity of living on one's own terms. The night deepens, and London hums faintly outside your window. Carriage wheels clattering over cobblestones, a stray shout from a tavern, the whistle of a distant train. Inside your room, the fire has burned down to a faint orange glow, shadows stretching like long fingers across the peeling wallpaper. You lie in your narrow bed, the blanket pulled high against the damp chill, and let your mind wander. These are the hours when the masks of the day fall away. By daylight you are dutiful, modest, invisible, but at night, in the stillness, you allow yourself the dangerous luxury of dreaming. What would life have been? Had a proposal once come your way? Perhaps you imagine yourself in a larger house, a husband seated across from you by the fire, children's laughter echoing in the halls. But then the dream stumbles. Would that husband have been kind? Or cruel, as so many are? Would those children have lived, or would you have buried them one by one in the cold churchyard, like countless women before you? You turn on your side and stare at the faint glow of the dying embers. Maybe, just maybe, spinsterhood is not the nightmare the world tells you it is. You survived another day without hunger, without beatings, without being swallowed whole by endless pregnancies. That is something. That is freedom, of a sort. On your bedside table rests a small notebook filled with your cramped handwriting. Poems, fragments of thoughts, tiny sketches of flowers pressed between its pages. You run your hand over the cover, knowing that no one may ever read these words. And yet, they are yours. A husband might have dismissed your scribblings as foolish. A household full of children would have left you no time to write them. But here, in the quiet of your spinster's room, you have carved out this little world of your own. Outside, the church clock tolls midnight, its heavy sound rolling through the fog. You close your eyes. In your dreams, you may walk across wide green fields, or sit by the sea, or even stand in a world where no one whispers the word spinster at all. And though tomorrow the same routines await you, the plain dress, the sewing, the sidelong glances from neighbours, tonight, in this fragile space between wakefulness and sleep, you hold onto a secret truth. You belong to no one but yourself. Years slip past quietly, like the fog rolling in and out of London streets. What began as the awkward age of 30 becomes 40, then 50, and at last the twilight of 60. You are no longer merely a spinster, you are now the old maiden aunt, the figure society treats with a peculiar mixture of dismissal and dependence. Your hair has silvered, your eyes grown softer, and yet your presence carries weight in the family. Brothers and sisters who once pitied you now rely on you to nurse them when they fall ill, to mind their children when duty calls them away, to be the dependable one who never marries, never wanders, never leaves. You are the constant, the quiet hearth around which everyone else moves. And though the whispers never fully stop, neighbours still cluck their tongues and say, "Poor Miss So-and-so, she never did marry." Something has shifted. In age, spinsterhood acquires a strange dignity. You're no longer viewed as a failed wife, but as a wise elder, a safe confidant, even a little intimidating in your solitude. Children are told to behave in your presence, not because you have authority, but because you exude a certain sharp-eyed watchfulness that comes from years of observation. Your days are quieter now. The sewing basket still sits by your chair, but your fingers tire more easily. You read more than ever, though spectacles pinch the bridge of your nose. You keep letters in boxes tied with ribbon, a lifetime of correspondence that no one else has bothered to save. And sometimes, late at night, you lift one of those letters and remember a world long gone, a girlhood friend, a youthful admirer, a cousin who has since passed. Yet there is comfort in these later years. You watch as younger women are ground down by the demands of endless childbearing, their faces lined with fatigue before they reach 40. You know you have been spared that fate. Your body, though aged, is your own. Your mind, though often underestimated, has roamed freely through books and ideas for decades. You have lived, not as society wished, but as quietly and stubbornly as you chose. When death finally comes, and in Victorian times it always comes sooner than expected, your funeral will not be grand. Perhaps a small group will gather, nieces and nephews grateful in their own way, though unsure how to measure the meaning of your life. Some will mutter that you lived a lonely existence, others will shake their heads and say you were strange. But somewhere in the quiet ledger of history, your presence will remain, a life that refused to be erased even if it went unnoticed. For in truth, the Victorian spinster leaves behind a legacy not of wealth, not of children, but of endurance. A stubborn survival, a life lived on her own terms, whether the world liked it or not. And perhaps, in that small defiance, she left behind more freedom for the women who would come after. If you could lift that Victorian spinster out of her narrow London room and place her in our own century, the contrast would be dizzying. Imagine her stepping into a world where women move freely in universities, walk alone through cities without scandal, vote in parliaments, and even choose never to marry without carrying a lifelong brand of shame. She would likely blink in disbelief at the sight of a woman in trousers, at a female doctor, at women leading companies, or travelling the world unchaperoned. For her, the word spinster was heavy as stone, crushing with ridicule and pity. For us, the equivalent word, single woman, can even carry pride, independence, and the suggestion of choice. And yet, there is a strange kinship across the years. For even in our modern freedoms, echoes of that Victorian judgment still linger. Society still raises its eyebrows at a woman too old and still unmarried. The whispers have not vanished. They have only softened. In some families, in some towns, the ghost of the spinster still stalks. But perhaps that is why the Victorian spinster matters so much. She endured the scorn, carried the label, and lived anyway. She proved, silently, stubbornly, that life without a husband was still a life, sometimes even a freer one. Without intending it, she carved the first cracks in the great edifice of Victorian patriarchy. Those cracks widened over the decades until women could walk through them as students, workers, and citizens of their own making. So, when you imagine yourself as a Victorian spinster, do not picture only loneliness, tea gone cold, and whispered ridicule. Picture resilience. Picture the quiet rebellion of simply existing outside the rules and surviving long enough to see those rules weaken. The spinster, after all, is not just a relic of Victorian society. She is a symbol of endurance, of hidden strength, of a future that she herself would never live to see, but that she helped invisibly to shape. The coals in the hearth have faded now to a faint red glow, like the last heartbeat of the day. Your small room is wrapped in silence, the street outside muffled by the heavy London fog. You lie beneath your patched quilt, the fabric smelling faintly of lavender soap and coal dust, and you let your tired body sink into the mattress. The clock ticks softly on the mantel. Each second passes slowly, like the drip of water from a leaky tap. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, and soon your thoughts drift with it. The worries of the day, the sewing, the stares, the unspoken judgments, fade into something lighter, more distant. You think of the small pleasures that carried you through, the feel of warm tea in your hands, the lines of poetry in your notebook, the rare but precious laughter of a friend. You think of how, though society called you spinster, you carried within yourself something richer, a private world, untouched and yours alone. The fog presses gently against the window panes, as if the city itself were breathing slowly, preparing to sleep. A carriage rattles faintly in the distance, then is swallowed by silence. Somewhere a church bell tolls once, low and soft, and then the night holds its breath. You close your eyes. The world thinks you are alone, but here, in this moment, there is only peace. No expectations, no duties, no one's shadow but your own. Just the quiet dignity of your breath, steady and calm, carrying you gently into sleep. And as dreams begin to gather at the edge of your mind, the last thought you carry with you is simple. You endured. You lived. You were more than the word they gave you. Sleep comes at last like a kind companion, and the Victorian spinster drifts away into the soft embrace of night. Morning will come again, as it always does, with the rattle of coal carts in the street and the cry of vendors selling bread or eels. For you, a Victorian spinster, each day looks much the same, and yet no two are identical. Every sunrise carries its own small rituals, its own hidden tests, and its own fragile moments of quiet beauty. You will wake to the sound of sparrows fluttering at the window, your breath forming pale mist in the cold air of your narrow bedroom. The quilt will feel heavy, stitched by your own hand, and for a moment you will not want to leave it. But duty, even in solitude, always pulls you from bed. There are stockings to mend, floors to sweep, and letters to answer, for even those who dismiss you still expect you to be useful. The neighbours will nod politely when you step outside, but behind closed curtains they will murmur, "Poor miss, another day alone." You will feel their eyes, sharp as pins, but you will also feel a curious strength in their gaze. They cannot imagine your life, and so they invent a story for you. But you live it, one quiet step at a time, shaping it as best you can. Some days will be lonely, some unbearably so, but others will surprise you with unexpected light. A student who plays her piano piece without a mistake, a child who gifts you a bunch of wildflowers, a friend who sends a letter scrawled with affection. These moments, small to the world, are large to you. They are proof that even outside the path prescribed for women, life has meaning. And though your future will not be written in wedding rings or family portraits, it will be written in other ways. In the notebooks you fill with thoughts, in the quiet kindnesses you give without recognition, in the simple endurance of being a woman who lived differently and lived still. Tomorrow, and the day after that, you will walk through London's fog not as a ghost, but as a presence the world underestimates. And in that underestimation lies your strange advantage, to exist freely in the shadows, watching, learning, enduring. For though society has named you spinster, in truth you are something rarer, a woman who belongs to herself. The fog is heavier today, curling around your ankles like a cat as you step outside. The iron railings of the townhouse gleam wet with drizzle, and the cobblestones glisten beneath your boots. You clutch your shawl tighter, for a woman walking alone always feels the city's eyes upon her. London is never silent. Even in the mist it roars with life. You pass the fishmongers, their stalls crowded with slippery eels and oysters, shouting over one another in voices hoarse from the cold. The smell is sharp, briny, almost overwhelming. Next comes the butcher's shop, where bloody aprons swing like banners, and children peer into the window, wide-eyed at the carcasses on display. You look away quickly. Respectable ladies are not supposed to stare at such sights. As you walk, your ears catch fragments of conversations. Factory girls laughing as they hurry down an alley, a pair of gentlemen debating politics outside a coffee house, a mother scolding her child for running into the street, and then always there are the whispers. When you pass, voices lower. Men tip their hats politely but do not linger. Women glance at you sidelong as if your solitude might be a warning or a curse. Still, the city offers its secret pleasures. The bookshop on Fleet Street, where the air smells of dust and ink, and the proprietor does not mind if you browse for an hour without buying. The churchyard garden, where benches wait under bare winter branches, and you can sit with a book unnoticed, hidden behind the veil of fog. Even the bustle of the market holds a strange comfort. The clamour, the colours, the press of bodies reminding you that you are part of something larger, even if society insists you do not quite belong. Of course, dangers lurk too. A lone woman attracts not only pity but suspicion. Policemen glance at you with curiosity, as if wondering why no husband walks beside you. A drunkard mutters under his breath when you refuse to meet his eye. And always, there is the unspoken rule. A woman out of place is a woman at risk. You know to walk briskly, to keep your chin high, to carry yourself with dignity that protects like armour. Yet, as you cross Blackfriars Bridge, the Thames rolling dark and endless beneath you, a strange thought flickers. Perhaps you are freer than they imagine. No one waits for you at home impatiently. No one commands your steps. The city is vast, and though it does not welcome you warmly, it does not forbid you either. You are invisible, but invisibility, if embraced, can feel very much like freedom. The fog thickens again as the bells of St. Paul's toll in the distance. You turn back toward your narrow room, your shawl damp, your cheeks cold, your heart heavy but steady. London has reminded you once more of who you are, overlooked, yes, but enduring, a solitary figure moving through a city that never stops watching, never stops whispering, and yet cannot erase you. In Victorian London, reputation is everything. For a married woman, her honour is bound to her husband's name. For a widow, to the dignity of her mourning. But for a spinster, the story society tells is one you cannot control. You are, in their eyes, a living cautionary tale. At tea tables and drawing rooms, your name becomes a subject of gentle pity, or thinly veiled ridicule. Poor Miss Ellison, she never did marry, a neighbour might murmur, stirring sugar into her cup. She's become so very odd, keeping cats, of all things, and reading those dreadful novels. Another will sigh and nod as though your very existence proves a moral lesson. This is what happens when a woman is too choosy, or too plain, or too clever for her own good. The irony is sharp, for no matter how you lived your life, the verdict was already written. If you dressed too plainly, you were accused of bitterness. If you allowed yourself a ribbon or a touch of lace, you were mocked for trying too hard. If you devoted yourself to charity, you were praised as useful, but never respected as equal. If you lived quietly, you were forgotten altogether. Children are warned about you. Young girls are told in hushed tones not to end up like Miss So-and-so. You become a shadow in their imagination, a future to fear, and yet those same families rely on you. When illness comes, you are summoned to nurse the sick. When children need teaching, you are asked to give lessons. When money runs short, you are expected to lend, not much, but something. They depend on you, but never admit it aloud. Whispers about your eccentricities often grow as you age. Perhaps you talk too much to your cat. Perhaps you read late into the night with the curtains drawn. Perhaps you walk alone through the park, or spend too long in the bookshop. Each harmless habit becomes, in the mouth of gossip, a symptom of your condition, the incurable illness of being unmarried. And yet, within this reputation lies a hidden weapon. Society may dismiss you, but in doing so, it underestimates you. They do not watch your every move as they do a young bride. They do not smother you with expectations as they do a mother of 6. You slip under the radar, dismissed as irrelevant, and in that irrelevance you can think, observe, and even rebel quietly in ways married women cannot. So, while the world laughs at the idea of the spinster, the dried-up rose, the bitter aunt, the invisible woman in the corner, you know a truth they cannot see. Your life is not defined by their gossip. Their words are sharp, yes, but they are also hollow. For you still rise each morning, walk through the city, earn your bread, and fall asleep on your own terms. And in the end, when all the whispers fade, the echo that remains is not their laughter, but your endurance. Though the world may see only loneliness, the life of a Victorian spinster is not without its quiet delights. They are not grand, not the kind of pleasures that fill novels with romance or drawing rooms with envy, but they are yours, and they are enough to soften the edges of solitude. There is the joy of a perfectly steeped cup of tea, steam curling gently in the lamplight. Married women gulp their tea amid noise and demands, but you sip slowly, letting the warmth spread through your hands, your chest, your very bones. In that simple moment, the world feels calm, manageable, even kind. There is the pleasure of walking through a garden, not your own perhaps, but the public squares or churchyards where roses bloom defiantly against the soot. You pause by the flower beds, noticing details no one else bothers to see, the precise curl of a petal, the way bees dart in and out with tireless devotion. Married women rush past, but you linger, savouring each detail as if nature itself had bloomed for you alone. Books, too, bring their secret joy. You open a novel with reverence, the pages rough against your fingertips. Dickens, Eliot, the Brontes, their words transport you beyond your narrow room, across moors, into drawing rooms, even into the secret chambers of the human heart. With each chapter, your solitude dissolves. You live a dozen lives through paper and ink, each richer than the whispers about your own. There are friendships, modest perhaps, but no less cherished. Another unmarried woman visits, and together you share biscuits and laughter, the kind that bubbles up from the chest and surprises you both. For an hour the world fades, and you're simply 2 women alive, not 2 failures labelled spinsters. And sometimes there are even moments of indulgence, a piece of sugared almond from a street vendor, bright and sweet on your tongue, a ribbon bought in secret, tucked into your drawer where no one can call it frivolous, a rare concert where music swells and soars until you feel your heart beating faster than it has in years. These joys may be small, but they are steady. They do not depend on a husband's favour or children's obedience. They are yours, chosen and savoured in your own time, with your own quiet freedom. And as you sit by the fire, teacup warm in your hands, you realise that happiness need not come in grand gestures. Sometimes it lives in the small things, a page turned, a flower noticed, a laugh shared, the kind of joys only a spinster has the time and the solitude to truly see. The Victorian age is nothing if not an age of upheaval. Factories sprout like iron mushrooms on the edges of towns. Railways cut through countryside once thought eternal. Newspapers multiply, bringing gossip, scandal and politics into every parlour. And though society imagines you frozen in place, the spinster in her plain shawl eternally unchanged, the truth is that the world around you is shifting, and you with it. The iron horse of the railway changes everything. Where once you might have lived and died within a few streets of your birthplace, now even a modest woman can purchase a ticket and travel miles away. You sit in the third-class carriage, bonnet tied, gloves folded in your lap, and gaze out at landscapes rushing by. Fields blur into factories, villages into stations. For the first time, distance feels conquerable. A spinster may be invisible in her neighbourhood, but on the train she is simply another passenger, another soul moving forward. The printed word, too, becomes your secret ally. Cheap penny papers and serialised novels bring the world into your hands. You read about explorers in Africa, revolutions in Europe, scientific discoveries that shake the very foundation of belief. Married women may only glance at headlines, too consumed by household duties. But you, with your evenings free, devour them. You begin to know more about the outside world than anyone suspects. And then, whispers of something even greater. Women daring to speak of rights. Pamphlets circulate about education, property laws, the idea that a woman might own her earnings or even vote. You hear names like Harriet Martineau, Josephine Butler, Florence Nightingale, women who, like you, defied the script of marriage and forged their own paths. Society calls them eccentrics, but you feel a spark in their defiance. Perhaps spinsterhood is not an ending, but a beginning, the first step in a slow revolution. Even in your own community, the changes are felt. You see young factory girls walking to work, earning wages no man controls. You see widows running shops, managing accounts, proving themselves capable. And you, dismissed as irrelevant, realize that you are part of this same quiet transformation. By existing outside the boundaries, by surviving without a husband, you have been rehearsing independence long before the word became fashionable. London itself reflects this restless spirit. The fog, once thick with mystery, now glows faintly with electric light. New bridges stretch across the Thames. The Crystal Palace rises in Hyde Park, gleaming like the future itself. You walk through its halls, surrounded by glass and steel, and think, the world is growing faster than gossip, stronger than shame. And in that moment, you understand something society never intended you to know. The Victorian spinster is not a relic of the past. She is the quiet seed of what is to come. For most Victorians, the word spinster meant absence. Absence of a husband, absence of children, absence of a story worth telling. And yet, in the gaps left by what society denied you, another kind of presence quietly grew. Influence. A hidden power. Subtle, but undeniable. Consider the home. Families dismissed you as the extra woman at the table, the aunt with no household of her own. But in truth, many relied on you to hold theirs together. You nursed the sick when others feared contagion. You taught children their letters when their parents were too busy. You managed correspondence, balanced household accounts, even advised brothers and nephews in matters of business. All this labour, unacknowledged, made you indispensable, the silent axis around which families turned. Consider education. The explosion of schools in the 19th century demanded teachers, governesses, tutors. Married women could not take such posts. Their lives were bound by domestic duties. And so, spinsters filled the classrooms. They became the architects of literacy, instilling knowledge into a generation that would carry Britain into the modern world. In chalk dust and ink stains, you left your legacy on minds that would never forget you. Consider charity. With no husband to direct your purse, you chose where your small income went. Many spinsters poured it into parish relief, orphanages, hospitals and missions. You were mocked for being fussy or overzealous. Yet your money and your labour kept institutions alive. In a city where poverty pressed at every doorstep, your quiet devotion meant survival for thousands who never knew your name. And finally, consider perception itself. Society tried to erase you, but in doing so, it left you curiously free. A married woman's behaviour was scrutinised, judged at every turn. Yours? Already dismissed, already scorned, and therefore less closely watched. In this shadow, you could think more boldly, speak more sharply, read more widely. Some called you eccentric, others dangerous. But what you truly were was unbound. This is the paradox of spinsterhood. The very stigma meant to diminish you became in time a cloak of independence. You were not a wife, not a mother, but that meant you were also not trapped, not silenced, not wholly consumed. You endured the whispers, yes, but behind them you discovered the rarest Victorian treasure of all, space to shape your own mind. And so, in the quietest of ways, the Victorian spinster carried more power than the world dared to admit. When the Victorian era finally faded, its gas lamps giving way to electricity, its carriages replaced by motor cars, its rigid etiquette crumbling beneath the weight of new centuries, the spinster did not vanish. She lingered, not just in memory but in language, in culture, and in the imagination of generations that followed. In Edwardian novels, she became the sharp-tongued aunt or the watchful neighbour at the window. In early films, she was painted as the lonely figure with a cat, half comic, half tragic. And even as the world moved forward, the word spinster itself carried the echo of the Victorian shadow, the idea of a woman unfinished without marriage. Yet symbols evolve, and so did she. For feminists of the 20th century, the spinster became something else entirely. Not a failure, but a pioneer. She was proof that a woman could live outside the institution of marriage, that she could think, work, and survive without tethering her existence to a man. The figure once ridiculed was reimagined as a model of independence. Even now, when the old word is rarely spoken, its ghost lingers. Modern women who choose careers over families, who remain unmarried by choice or by chance, often feel the faint weight of that Victorian judgment. But they also inherit the hidden strength of those who came before, those spinsters who endured whispers and pity, yet carved out lives of dignity, resilience, and unexpected power. The Victorian spinster remains then, not only as a relic of the past, but as a mirror. She reflects the fears society holds about women who live differently, and at the same time she reflects the strength such women discover in themselves. And so, when you close this journey and imagine once more waking as a Victorian spinster, in your small room, with your plain dress, your quiet routines, remember, you are not merely the woman the world forgot. You are the woman who survived in spite of it. You are the woman who proved that life without approval is still life, and that solitude can sometimes be the fiercest form of freedom. That is the enduring symbol of the spinster, mocked by her age, but remembered by history as something more, a quiet, stubborn flame that refused to go out. Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the foggy, gaslit streets of Victorian Britain, a place where the air was thick with soot, morals were surprisingly loose, and just about everyone was on something. Tonight is all about the pharmaceutical buffet that kept Victorian society spinning. Before you drift off, do me a small favour and tap the like button and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, flip on a fan for that gentle background hum, and tuck yourself under the sheets. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how Victorians coped with stress before self-care meant 10 streaming services and a $45 scented candle? What did people do when their teeth hurt, their nerves were frayed, or they just wanted to escape the horror of another family dinner? Was everyone really sipping morphine and calling it a tonic? Could you walk into a pharmacy and walk out with a bottle of cocaine toothache drops, no questions asked? Was Grandma high, or just pretending to enjoy her boiled cabbage again? And most importantly, would you survive a day in Victorian Britain without accidentally overdosing on something that sounded like a Hogwarts ingredient list? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1857 London. Your head hurts, your neighbour's ferret is coughing again, and your local chemist greets you by name. Good luck. Laudanum, the opiated cup of tea. Victorian mornings begin with a generous splash of laudanum, a glorious blend of opium and alcohol dropped into tea, baby bottles, and sometimes the family soup. Doctors prescribe it for coughs, headaches, existential dread, and mild inconveniences. You take your first sip, and suddenly your worries about the rent and the cholera outbreak feel delightfully far away. It's the original Don't Care Ola tonic. Let's set the scene. It's breakfast at your cramped London townhouse. The gas lamp flickers, the wallpaper is peeling, and the neighbours are already arguing about whose turn it is to shovel horse droppings off the stoop. On the table, a crust of stale bread, a cup of black tea, and a tiny brown bottle with a label that basically says, "Why not? Laudanum, the miracle medicine. It's 10% opium, 90% Victorian optimism, and it tastes like regret soaked in cherry. You reach for it without thinking, the way you'd reach for coffee today. Only this is coffee that would make you forget you're even late for work. A few drops in your tea and the world blurs at the edges. Your screaming toddler is blissfully snoozing thanks to a few drops slipped into his milk. The cat's yowling, Laudanum probably works on animals too, but you're not quite ready to share your secret stash with Whiskers just yet. Victorian doctors love laudanum. They prescribe it for nearly everything. Toothaches, insomnia, menstrual cramps, wounded pride, female troubles, boredom, and of course the infamous nervous complaint. Your neighbour, Mrs. Parker, swears it helped her bunions. Your uncle used it for gout. Your Aunt Edna takes it for delicate nerves, which, as far as you can tell, means she's tired of living with Uncle Alfred. Even your local poet claims laudanum is the secret to writing 5 sad sonnets before breakfast. In the mid-19th century, before the Pharmacy Act of 1868, opium was sold freely at grocers, and laudanum was a common part of household life. But laudanum is more than just a quick fix, it's a lifestyle. You find yourself calculating how many errands you can run before it wears off. The answer? None. But you try anyway. Your walking pace slows, your worries melt, and even the foul River Thames seems picturesque in the hazy morning light. You could almost forget the city's constant noise, the clang of distant factories, and the haunting bell of the nearby undertaker, already wheeling away another victim of Victorian living. Let's talk side effects, because the Victorians sure didn't. Sure, you're not in pain anymore. In fact, you can't really feel anything below your chin. Time becomes slippery. You spend the afternoon reading the same paragraph in your Penny Dreadful, and wonder why the villain never gets any closer to finishing his evil plot. Later, you decide to get some fresh air, only to realise you've been staring out the same window for 3 hours, hypnotised by a pigeon with commitment issues. The real risk isn't immediate, of course, after all. Laudanum is completely legal and sold over the counter at every respectable chemist and corner grocer. No prescription needed, just a few coins and a friendly smile. Addiction? That's just another word for regular customer. If you start feeling jumpy, anxious, or your vision takes on the sepia tone of an old photograph, you just add another dash to your tea. Problem solved. Still, there's something almost comforting about this daily ritual. Life in Victorian Britain is relentless. Smog, debt, unwashed socks, unsolicited advice from distant relatives. Laudanum doesn't fix anything, but it makes everything feel possible. You might even write a letter to the editor about reform, or finally tackle that mountain of laundry. More likely, you'll take another nap and dream about a world with slightly less horse manure, and so the bottle sits on the mantel right next to the family Bible, the only 2 things guaranteed to bring comfort. As the day fades into a foggy evening, you pour one last dose and toast to Victorian resilience, the art of carrying on one dreamy, opiated cup at a time. Opium dens, the socialising Victorian style. Step into a smoke-filled East End cellar, where the air is thick enough to chew and dreams leak through the floorboards. Here, you stretch out on a battered sofa and share a pipe with strangers, drifting into a blissful haze as your wallet quietly disappears. It's socialising, Victorian style. Say little, drool a lot. Let's take you there. Your shoes are sticking to the floor. You duck through a battered wooden door, the street noise swallowed by heavy curtains. Instantly your nose twitches at a fug of incense, lamp oil, and something that might be weak, old cabbage. Or perhaps it's just someone's coat. The ceiling is low, the wallpaper peeling, and every surface is a mosaic of stains and colours that defy the natural spectrum. Congratulations. You're in an authentic Victorian opium den, a cross between a living room and a chemistry experiment gone wrong. The regulars ignore you, or at least try to. Most are somewhere between awake and astral projection. You weave past a pair of gentlemen who might be bankers, philosophers, or just really lost. There's a painter sprawled in the corner, humming to himself and sketching the same 3 lines on a crumpled napkin. Every table has a mismatched teacup, filled with something murky, and at least one dozing patron who's forgotten their own name. You flop down on a patched velvet sofa, the kind that would probably qualify as an archaeological find if it ever saw daylight. Someone passes you a long pipe, ornate, delicate, and sticky. The ritual begins. You heat a sliver of opium over a candle, inhale slowly, and wait for the world to slip its moorings. The first breath is sharp and bitter, but soon the taste disappears behind a tidal wave of numbness. A soft, warm fog settles into your bones. Every sound becomes a gentle echo, every worry floats away, and even your itchy socks no longer bother you. Conversation is optional and usually impossible, Victorian etiquette evaporates here. Nobody is comparing family pedigrees or debating the correct angle for a calling card. Instead, you share a companionable silence, broken only by the clink of glass, the hiss of matches, and the occasional poetic mumble. Your mind wanders. Maybe you remember a childhood pet, or the fact that you meant to pay your rent yesterday. Doesn't matter now. The world outside feels about as real as a novel you once read and forgot to finish. Time is elastic in the den. An hour drips by, or maybe it's 3. Occasionally, someone rouses enough to stagger out. Shoes missing, hat on backwards, eyes the colour of rainwater. The proprietor, a silent shadow with the stamina of a caffeinated bat, moves through the gloom, collecting coins, replenishing pipes, and making sure nobody accidentally sets themselves on fire. A good den keeper knows how to keep things just legal enough to avoid the police, but just shady enough to attract the poets. You watch as the line between dream and reality bends. Some patrons chase visions, gorgeous colours swirling in the gaslight, phantom music playing from nowhere. Others simply nap, faces slack and peaceful, achieving the elusive Victorian goal of rest without responsibility. It's cheaper than a holiday, and if you ignore the risk of arrest, theft, or a truly legendary hangover, almost as restorative. Let's be clear. Opium dens are not glamorous. You're lying on a questionable sofa next to a stranger snoring in Morse code. The air is so thick you can bite it, and the risk of tuberculosis is only slightly lower than the risk of being bored to death by a philosophy student on his 3rd pipe. But for a few hours, you float. The misery of the factory, the nagging of the landlord, the bleak British drizzle, all fade out to static. When you finally stagger outside, the city is quieter, the world softer, and your wallet lighter. You vow never to return. You'll be back tomorrow. Victorian self-care. Dream big, drool quietly, and always check your pockets. The all-purpose cure, cocaine. Forget flossing. You just dab a little cocaine on your gums, and suddenly you can't feel your face, let alone your dental pain. Victorians also used it for shyness, exhaustion, or to prepare for a really long, awkward dinner with the in-laws. Honestly, why brush when you can numb? Welcome to the medical marvel of the late Victorian age, over-the-counter cocaine, the original all-in-one solution for everything from dental emergencies to social anxiety, and, because it's Victorian England, also for anything described as female nerves, melancholia, or the persistent feeling that your hat is too tight. You pop by your local chemist, ask for something for your toothache, and walk out with a tiny glass vial and an enthusiastic recommendation. It's the 1890s, and everybody's feeling just a little bit more energetic than usual. Dentists absolutely adore this stuff. You walk in with a cavity the size of a shilling, and leave floating on a cloud of chemically induced indifference. The dentist smears cocaine on your gums, your lip goes numb, and suddenly dentistry isn't so bad after all. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, just pure pharmaceutical-grade confidence. Your dentist might even send you home with a sample so you can keep the good times rolling in the comfort of your own parlour. And it doesn't stop at toothaches. Are you feeling awkward at your cousin's engagement party? Cocaine. Got the mid-afternoon yawns after a morning spent dodging manure carts and judgmental glances from your neighbour? Cocaine. Want to impress your boss at the office with tireless work and alarming punctuality? There's a bottle for that. Victorian advertisements promise that cocaine will banish all sensation of fatigue, cheer the melancholic, and restore vigour to the most listless of spirits. Is it a wonder potion or just really, really good marketing? Yes. You might be wondering, what about side effects? Victorians are too, but mostly in the sense that they're excited to try new ones. Tingling, delightful, a sudden urge to clean the entire house at 2 a.m. Highly productive, the inability to stop talking about your ideas for inventing a self-ironing cravat. Finally, the family listens. And when the effects wear off, no problem. Just dab on a little more right before your next social engagement, or after, or both. Cocaine isn't just for the home crowd either. It's the darling of Victorian explorers, mountain climbers, and anyone unfortunate enough to be alive before the invention of reliable coffee. Sir Ranulph Fiennes probably never climbed Everest, but if he had, he would have packed a hearty supply. Victorian hikers chew cocaine-laced lozenges to brave the chilly winds of the Scottish Highlands and to forget, temporarily, that their boots are 80% holes. Even the Queen's physicians are in on the act. Her Majesty's special tonic contains a suspiciously invigorating blend of wine and coca leaves. It's prescribed for everything from delicate nerves to the persistent existential horror of living in an age where the average life expectancy is basically one bad winter. The most famous cocaine wine, Vin Mariani, was endorsed by popes and presidents alike, with one dose containing as much as 50 milligrams of pure cocaine. You take a sip, and suddenly it's much easier to ignore the coal smoke, the rats in the walls, and the fact that the family dog is still using the sitting room rug as his personal bathroom. If you're a little anxious, socially awkward, or simply tired of the Victorian grind, cocaine is the great equalizer. No longer must you suffer in silence through small talk or contemplate running away from your own dinner party. A discreet pinch on the gums and you're transformed, cheerful, chatty, and ever so slightly unstoppable. Your problems melt away, your gums go numb, and for a brief moment you're convinced you could give a speech in Parliament, or at least survive another game of charades. In the end, maybe cocaine doesn't solve your problems, but it sure makes you forget you had them. Your mouth is numb, your nerves are soothed, and your sense of Victorian decorum is temporarily out the window. Dentistry will never be the same. Sleep well, and remember, some smiles are best left numb. Chloral hydrate, the sleep that's too good to be true. Sleep doesn't come easy when you live above a busy street full of horses, hawkers, and 3 a.m. accordion concerts. Enter chloral hydrate, a new miracle sedative. Just one spoonful, and you drift off to sleep, possibly until the next coronation. Let's get comfortable. You've spent the day inhaling coal smoke, your hair smells like fried fish, and the neighbours in flat 2B are arguing about whose turn it is to empty the chamber pot. It's midnight, the oil lamp flickers, and the only thing more persistent than your anxiety is the sound of carriage wheels scraping cobblestones outside your window. You toss, you turn, you count sheep, until you remember that in Victorian England sheep mostly count you, but tonight you have a secret weapon. Chloral hydrate, bottled hope fresh from the apothecary. The label reads, for sleeplessness, nerves, and general agitation, which, if you're honest, is your entire personality after sunset. You pour a spoonful into a glass, swirl it with whatever's left of the cherry, and offer a silent thanks to the enterprising chemist who decided the human brain could be fixed with a clever molecule and a strong enough placebo effect. The taste is, well, chemical. Slightly sweet, faintly medicinal, like drinking the ghost of a cough syrup that's seen too much. But the effect is pure magic. In a few minutes, your eyelids grow heavy, the relentless tick-tock of the mantel clock slows to a gentle lull, and even the persistent smell of boiled cabbage from downstairs can't keep you awake. The city's noise blurs into a distant, soothing hum. The horses fade to a memory, the accordion mutates into a lullaby, and even the upstairs neighbour, who seems to take up midnight furniture rearranging as a competitive sport, becomes nothing but a shadow in a dream. Victorian doctors are thrilled with chloral hydrate. It's the first truly reliable sedative, a sleep aid without the poetic messiness of laudanum or the criminal undertones of opium dens. Chloral hydrate is modern, respectable, and not at all the sort of thing that might cause you to wake up in a different century. Prescribed for nervous disorders, insomnia, and occasionally for simply being too alive, it quickly finds a home on every bedside table, from Mayfair mansions to soot-stained boarding houses. Everyone has a story. Your friend Margaret takes it so she can sleep through her husband's enthusiastic snoring. Your brother-in-law uses it before big meetings with his boss, claiming that the secret to confidence is 8 uninterrupted hours of chemically assisted slumber. Even the family dog gets a taste, just a little mixed into his gravy to stop him from howling at the full moon and the constable's hat. Let's talk side effects. Yes, you wake up groggy. Sometimes you can't quite remember what you dreamt, or if you actually dreamt at all. There's a faint sense that your brain has been wrapped in a velvet blanket. Soft, but also slightly suffocating. Some mornings you linger in a pleasant fog, not quite sure if you're awake, asleep, or just existing in a third state reserved for Victorians and overtired modern commuters. But really, who's complaining? The ability to sleep through an entire parade, 3 domestic arguments, and a surprise visit from your aunt, who loves nothing more than 5 a.m. storytelling, is a blessing you don't take lightly. Besides, if you oversleep and miss work, you can always blame the fog, or the cat, or Victorian medicine in general. Chloral hydrate is not just a drug, it's a declaration. I will sleep, and nothing, certainly not the racket outside nor the existential terror of industrial Britain, will stop me. If you drift off and miss the next royal wedding, well, it's probably for the best. So one last yawn, one last spoonful. Sleep tight, insomniac. History is full of restless nights, but tonight, you're not one of them. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, nap time for the wee ones. Teething pains, restless baby? Just give the child a few drops of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, an over-the-counter concoction loaded with morphine. Victorian parents swear by it. Victorian children don't because they're asleep. You wonder why the kids are so quiet at dinner? Mystery solved. Let's picture it. Your household is a tornado of cranky toddlers, creaking floorboards, and the distant sound of a neighbour's cat expressing its opinions on moonlight. You've tried everything. Lullabies, gentle rocking, scolding, promising your offspring a pony if they'll just close their eyes. But Victorian parenting is not for the faint of heart, and at a certain point, every mother reaches for the same little glass bottle in the medicine chest, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. It's the original sleep mode, long before tablets and Gentle Rain soundtracks. The label promises miracles, relief from teething, colic, hiccups, mysterious Victorian illnesses like the vapours, and, if you read between the lines, general child-related chaos. 1 teaspoon and your child is transformed from wailing banshee to angelic cherub. It's not magic, it's morphine. And, in Victorian Britain, that's basically the same thing. Administering the syrup is a ritual. You measure out a careful spoonful, ignoring the very scientific just eyeball it method. The smell is faintly sweet, herbal, and tinged with the ineffable scent of quiet. Within minutes, your tiny human's eyelids grow heavy, the whimpering subsides, and the house is blessedly, gloriously peaceful for the first time all week. You can hear yourself think. You can also hear the sound of every other mother on the street breathing a collective sigh of relief. Let's not sugarcoat it. Victorian parenting is a marathon without snacks. There are no disposable nappies, no child-proof locks, no parenting books except the Bible, and, if you're lucky, a dog-eared copy of Mrs. Beeton's. A fussy child at night means the whole household is awake. Siblings, grandparents, the lodger you forgot was living in the attic. With 1 dose of soothing syrup, the baby drifts off, and you finally have a chance to address the other pressing issues of Victorian life, like scrubbing coal dust off the curtains or hiding from your landlord. Doctors adore Mrs. Winslow's. Pharmacists recommend it. Grandmothers pass down secret tips about how to make the effect last through the Sunday sermon. The recipe, a mix of morphine, alcohol, and gentle Victorian denial, quickly becomes the go-to for every family with a restless little one. The syrup is marketed as harmless and entirely safe, which in Victorian language means nobody's asked too many questions yet. There's even an entire advertising campaign featuring happy, rosy-cheeked babies and angelic mothers looking far more rested than reality allows. Posters boast that Mrs. Winslow's quietly soothes and relieves the bowels. No mention of what happens if you accidentally double dose, but that's a worry for another century. For now, the only thing you care about is sleep. Glorious sleep. Side effects? Well, they're mostly ignored. Children are quieter, sleepier, less likely to get into the coal scuttle. Some seem so soothed they barely wake for breakfast. But in a time before child psychology, or even regular hand-washing, peace and quiet trump minor concerns like consciousness. And so, bedtime in the Victorian era becomes a remarkably peaceful affair. The baby snoozes, the parents collapse into chairs, and the air is filled with a sense of accomplishment and the faint, ever-present aroma of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. You pat yourself on the back, close your eyes, and, for just a little while, pretend you've got it all figured out. Sleep well, little one. The Victorian night is long, the walls are thin, but at least tonight, thanks to Mrs. Winslow, everyone is getting some rest. Ether parties, a little chemical, giggling. Nothing says, let's have fun, like passing around a soaked handkerchief at a garden party. Whether you're a surgeon, a student, or just bored at a dance, ether brings people together in a haze of confusion and giggles. Let's set the scene. You're attending a respectable Victorian soiree, the kind where the punch is tepid, the dancing is enthusiastic but slightly off rhythm, and your neighbour insists on retelling the same story about his cousin's railway accident. It's a long evening ahead, but fortunately your hostess has a secret weapon stashed in the conservatory, a delicate glass bottle of ether. Officially it's for medical emergencies. Unofficially it's the most exciting thing to happen since last year's hedgehog race. Soon someone produces a lacy handkerchief and discreetly dabs it with ether, holding it up with a conspiratorial wink. You're not sure what to expect. Maybe a little dizziness, a little lightheadedness, a brief escape from the endless poker. Instead you inhale, and suddenly the walls go fuzzy, your knees wobble, and everything is hilarious. The flowers in the centerpiece are whispering secrets. Your aunt's laugh sounds like a kettle whistling underwater, and the hostess's hat appears to be floating slightly above her head. You collapse gracefully onto a fainting couch, giggling with a group of new best friends, none of whose names you will remember by morning. Ether isn't just a parlour game for the bored upper classes, it's a medical marvel too. Victorian surgeons sing its praises. Before ether, surgery was a desperate race against pain, held down by 4 strong assistants and a bottle of gin. You'd be lucky to survive the operation and the hangover. Now, with ether, the patient drifts off to a peaceful nothingness, blissfully unaware as doctors do their best to improve whatever's wrong with you. Victorian style, of course. That doesn't mean surgery is safe. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's still a good chance you'll wake up missing an extra limb, but at least you didn't scream the wallpaper off the walls. Surgeons are delighted, patients are groggy, everybody wins. Ether becomes the go-to for tooth extractions, amputations, and, if you're a particularly nervous bride, occasionally even wedding nights. Students and medical apprentices quickly catch on to ether's more recreational possibilities. Chemistry class becomes a lot more interesting when the laboratory assistants are chasing each other around with bottles of the stuff, dissolving in fits of laughter at jokes about potassium. University parties evolve. Instead of sherry and tedious conversation, there's a round of who can hold their breath the longest before giggling uncontrollably. If you lose, you faint. If you win, you also faint, but with style. Ether is, in some ways, the great social equalizer. Rich or poor, anxious or exuberant, everyone agrees on one thing. Life's worries seem a lot smaller with a nose full of volatile chemicals. Stressed about the coming industrial revolution? Ether. Sick of the cousin who plays the accordion at midnight? Ether. Curious about the world beyond the garden hedge but too shy to ask? You guessed it. Are there drawbacks? Of course. The aftermath is less glamorous. You might wake up on the grass with your hat on backwards or discover you've confessed your undying love to the family spaniel. Occasionally the party ends with someone fainting dramatically into the shrubbery or a guest attempting to waltz with the grandfather clock. The neighbours talk, but honestly they're jealous they weren't invited. But for a brief, intoxicating spell, ether turns the humdrum Victorian evening into something approaching joy. You return to reality with a smile, slightly dizzy, certain that, if only for a moment, everything was light, silly, and full of possibility. Ether, because sometimes history's greatest medical breakthrough is also the life of the party. Gin, the poor man's philosopher. Before there were trendy cocktails, there was gin, cheap, powerful, and everywhere. You drink it to forget your troubles, and then drink more to forget you drank it. By morning, the hangover is legendary, and the solution is more gin. Let's paint the picture. It's a chilly evening in Victorian London, the kind where the fog seeps into your bones and every street lamp glows like an accusation. Your job is uncertain, your rent's overdue, and your neighbour has just been promoted to local character by virtue of yelling at pigeons for 3 hours straight. What do? You wander down a narrow alley, dodging puddles of mysterious origin, and find yourself at the entrance to a gin shop, a haven for the worn, the weary, and the absolutely done with this century. Inside, the light is dim, The air is thick with laughter, complaints, and a general miasma of disappointment. The bartender gives you a look that says, "Join the club," then sloshes a generous measure of gin into a chipped glass. It burns on the way down, but you can almost feel it working, like a tiny squad of liquid optimists marching through your veins, promising you that tomorrow will probably not be worse. Probably. Gin is everywhere. Mothers drink it to steady their nerves. Fathers drink it to forget their jobs, or lack thereof. Kids might not drink it, but they definitely know the smell. Sharp, herbal, like a pine forest set on fire and extinguished in regret. It's called Mother's Ruin, and if that sounds dramatic, you haven't met a Victorian mother 3 gins deep. The government tries to intervene, but the people just switch to new recipes, new back-alley stills, new ways to turn potatoes, grains, or leftover sadness into something drinkable. You notice that nobody sips gin here. There are no delicate garnishes, no umbrella-topped cocktails, just mugs and throats in the immediate pursuit of numbness. You down another round. Conversation loosens, laughter rises, and for a brief, shining moment, you forget that your boots are wet and your prospects are drier than the gin itself. The gin shop is a study in Victorian sociology. There's a banker crying in the corner about his lost investments, a pair of chimney sweeps arm wrestling for half a pie, and an old woman quietly humming "God Save the Queen" as she lines up her empty glasses with military precision. You make a friend, a shoemaker who swears he once cobbled for the Prime Minister. He can't remember which Prime Minister, but the story gets better with each refill. Of course, the real problem is the morning after. You wake up in a room that might be yours, surrounded by the detritus of bad decisions, a broken hat, an unfamiliar dog, and a note on your hand that reads, "Never trust a man with 2 umbrellas." Your head feels like a construction site, your mouth like a gravel pit, and your stomach is auditioning for a role in a Greek tragedy. The Victorian solution? More gin. The hair of the dog is less a metaphor, more a way of life. You stumble back to the shop, clutching your head, and order another round. The cycle continues, unbroken, until either payday or a sudden burst of moral reform. Occasionally, you vow to stop. Sometimes you even succeed, for an hour or 2. Still, there's something honest about it. Gin is the drink of the people, the poor man's philosopher, the consolation prize for surviving another day in a city that never really goes to sleep. It's liquid courage, liquid regret, and liquid proof that the Victorians were, above all, stubbornly optimistic. Or maybe just stubborn. So tonight, raise a glass to your ancestors. They survived the gin epidemic, which saw Londoners drinking an estimated 2.2 gallons of gin per person per year in the 1740s, and so, miraculously, did the human race. Sleep well, and maybe stick to tea tomorrow. Patent medicines. A tonic for what ails thee. Victorian streets are bursting with colourful bottles promising to cure what ails you. Some contain cocaine, others contain alcohol, and some, if you're unlucky, contain mercury. You buy a bottle for your melancholy and wind up with a new rash and a cheerful attitude. Let's take a stroll down the high street. Boots clacking on cobbles, purse in hand, your body riddled with aches, pains, and at least 3 kinds of mystery fatigue. Your first stop isn't the doctor, it's the chemist's shop, a Victorian wonderland of dubious science and even more dubious ethics. Shelves are lined with patent medicines in every hue, gleaming in the gaslight, labels screaming promises like "invigorates the liver" or "restores lost manliness." You pick one up, Doctor. Bicknell's Invincible Elixir, and wonder if it will finally cure your Sunday morning dread, or just make you see through time. Shopping for medicine in Victorian Britain is less like a health intervention, and more like participating in a strange lottery. No prescription needed, just a willingness to gamble with your own internal organs. Most patent medicines are a cheerful blend of sugar syrup, questionable extracts, and enough alcohol to qualify as breakfast. Some are loaded with opiates, which guarantees at least temporary relief. Others promise a quick and thorough cleansing of the system, which is Victorian for stay close to a chamber pot. Reading the label is its own adventure. Ingredients are listed with the kind of optimism only a 19th century copywriter could muster. A dash of strychnine, a pinch of calamine, and just enough chloroform to keep you guessing. For all you know, botanical essence could be code for whatever the apprentice swept off the floor. The more outrageous the claim, the better it sells. Did your hair fall out? There's a tonic for that. Are you feeling blue? Try Doctor, Periwinkle's Joyful Dew, which tastes like licorice and somehow also like despair. Every respectable household keeps a few bottles on hand. One for headaches, one for digestive trouble, one for the nerves, and a mystery bottle you inherited from your aunt that glows slightly in the dark. Children get a spoonful for coughs, women for female troubles, and men for absolutely anything that might interfere with sitting still for 5 minutes. If you're really lucky, you might find one that doesn't taste like regret marinated in turpentine. Patent medicines are the original multi-level marketing scheme. They're advertised everywhere. Posters on every lamppost, testimonials in the penny papers, travelling salesmen who promise the moon and deliver mild hallucinations. Your favourite testimonial comes from a gentleman in Leeds who claims Doctor. Wormwood's restorative cordial cured his gout, sciatica, and fear of Mondays, all in one bottle. And let's not forget the secret ingredient, hope. Even when you know deep down that Reverend Splendid's marvellous drops are 80% gin and 20% broken promises, you still take a swig and believe for a few moments that tomorrow might be slightly less Victorian than today. Of course, there are side effects. This is Victorian medicine after all. Maybe your hands tingle, your vision blurs, or you develop a rash in a location best left undescribed. You don't tell anyone. It's probably just the humours acting up. And if your patent medicine doesn't fix your problem, no worries. The chemist will happily sell you another bottle with a different label and exactly the same ingredients. By the end of the week, your bathroom shelf is a rainbow of remedies, none of which actually cure you, but all of which make life slightly more bearable. You can't help but admire the creativity of the age. Patent medicines are part miracle, part con, and part community theatre. So you take another sip, toast your reflection, and try not to think too hard about what's swirling in the glass. In Victorian Britain, sometimes the best cure is simply believing you've taken one. Sleep tight, and maybe put the glowing bottle back in the cupboard, just in case. The great equalizer, chloroform. Dentists love it, surgeons adore it, and if you're unlucky enough to faint in public, you might wake up to the gentle scent of chloroform on a hanky. Victorians use it for pain, sleep, and the occasional impromptu kidnapping. Let's set the scene. It's another bustling day in Victorian Britain, and you're minding your own business when a toothache strikes with all the subtlety of a steam train. In a world without Novocaine, you head to the dentist, though dentist here means a man with steady hands, questionable hygiene, and a surprisingly upbeat attitude. The solution? Chloroform. The latest miracle in pain relief, and if you're not careful, mild existential out-of-body experiences. The ritual is simple. You're asked to recline in the world's lumpiest chair while the dentist produces a crisp white handkerchief and a small brown bottle. He pours a few drops of clear liquid, gives you a look of grim encouragement, and presses the cloth over your nose and mouth. You inhale, feeling a cool, sweet numbness drift up from your toes to your scalp. The world blurs, sounds grow distant, and suddenly you're dreaming about winning the derby on a horse made entirely of marshmallows. Surgery, too, is transformed. Where once the operating theatre was a place of howling, writhing, and general Victorian melodrama, now it's oddly peaceful. Surgeons adore chloroform. It turns their patients from shrieking banshees into compliant lumps, free to be poked, prodded, and improved upon without the inconvenience of struggling or legal complaints. The medical journals fill with breathless reports. Appendix removed, no screaming. Leg amputated, patient dreamed of Paris. Even the most anxious patient, which, let's be honest, is everyone, can now look forward to surgery with something like calm, or at least mild curiosity. Chloroform soon escapes the operating room and finds its way into daily life. Feeling restless at night? One whiff and you're off to dreamland. Your mother-in-law visiting for the week? A little dab on her pillow might encourage tranquility. You didn't hear it from me. Victorians begin to treat chloroform like a miracle cure for life's general inconveniences. Noisy children, overlong sermons, and that annoying friend who always wants to discuss philosophy at dinner. There are even rumours of society parties, where the entertainment involves passing a chloroform-dampened scarf around the room and seeing who can stay awake the longest. Of course there are downsides. For one, dosing is an art, not a science. Too little, and you're wide awake with a damp face. Too much, and you might not wake up for the rest of the century. Some people get so enthusiastic that they wake up in a completely different city, usually missing a shoe and with no memory of the previous 48 hours. But in true Victorian style, these are seen less as risks and more as excellent stories for the next family dinner. And then there are the kidnappings, the stuff of penny dreadfuls and urban legend. If you faint on a crowded street, there's a small but non-zero chance that a mysterious stranger will produce a chloroform-soaked rag and spirit you away, Victorian damsel in distress style. More often, though, it's just the local doctor making sure you don't wake up before he's finished removing your tonsils, appendix, or, if you're unlucky, your dignity. Despite it all, chloroform remains the darling of the Victorian medicine cabinet. It is at heart a shortcut to oblivion, blissful, dreamless, and, if all goes well, mercifully brief. The pain is gone, the noise fades, and for a little while life's sharpest edges are rounded off. So, as you settle in for the night, be grateful for modern anaesthetics, and maybe sleep with one eye open just in case anyone comes near you with a suspiciously floral handkerchief. Sleep well, and may your dreams be blissfully free of Victorian dentistry, surgery, and accidental adventures in chloroform. Hark, noble listeners, and welcome, or should I say, greetings, gentlefolk of the digital realm, from this humble corner of what was once Wallachia, a land where even our mountains have seen a peculiar sort of high. Gather round, draw close to your glowing screens, for tonight we shall embark upon a most peculiar journey. Forget your worries of plagues and poor harvest for a moment, and let us delve into the truly bewildering question: what in the name of all that is holy, and occasionally quite unholy, was it like to get high in the tumultuous, often terrifying, but always fascinating times of the Middle Ages? All right, picture this. You've had a day. Your lords just raised taxes again. The Black Death is probably knocking on your neighbour's door, and your teeth feel like they're staging a revolt. Perhaps the local witch just gave your cow a suspicious look, or your beloved pig mysteriously developed a limp after she walked by. You just want to escape, right? Kick back, maybe watch some TikToks of dancing peasants, whatever your weary soul desires. But here's the kicker. It's the 14th century. No Netflix, no comfy couch, no craft beer, let alone a cannabis dispensary delivering to your hovel, whether you're in the muddy fields of England or the forested hills of Transylvania. So, how did our medieval ancestors get their chill on? Or, more accurately, how did they trip balls in a world where modern medicine was basically leeches and a prayer, and superstition often trumped science, often with terrifyingly psychedelic results? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, prepare for a wild ride that might make you think twice about complaining about your Wi-Fi signal. And if you're a returning member of our historical fellowship, you know the drill. Before we plunge into the delightfully disturbing world of medieval mind alteration, do me a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and for this one, I actually recommend dimming the lights. Get cozy. Maybe grab a cup of, well, anything not suspicious looking. Because what we're about to explore is less Netflix and chill and more noxious fumes and thrill. Settle in, because we're going on an expedition into the hazy, hallucinatory history of medieval highs. And believe me, it gets weird. The apothecary, your gateway to potential madness and medieval misadventure. You, a weary peasant, stumble into the local apothecary. It's not a welcoming sight. Forget quaint little shops with soothing teas and carefully arranged essential oils designed for your holistic well-being. Oh no, this is more akin to a forgotten corner of a mad alchemist's lab, mixed with the back room of a very unsanitary butcher shop, and perhaps a dash of a taxidermist's dusty workshop. The very air here is thick with a cloying, almost suffocating scent, a sickly sweet perfume desperately trying and failing to mask the underlying stench of decay, unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and something vaguely metallic, like old blood and rust. Cobwebs hang like forgotten dreams, thick and grey, coated in a fine dust of what exactly? Ground-up beetles? Dried newt eyes? Perhaps the shed skin of a particularly robust serpent, or the pulverized bones of a stray dog. You try not to breathe too deeply, lest you accidentally inhale a spore that turns you into a talking mushroom with an existential crisis, or worse, gives you a mysterious fever that only a perilous pilgrimage to a distant, barely authenticated relic can cure. This wasn't your friendly neighborhood CVS, folks. This was where you went for your myriad ailments, from the mundane rash to the mysterious, falling sickness. It was also the go-to for your questionable love potions, your curses for troublesome neighbours who graze their sheep on your land, and, if you knew the right whispers, your ticket to a different reality, a fleeting escape from the relentless grimness of medieval life. The apothecary himself, or herself, for cunning women often filled this role, was a figure of both respect and suspicion. Often a monk with access to ancient texts and cultivated herb gardens, a barber surgeon with more enthusiasm for bleeding than understanding of anatomy, or a travelling charlatan with a captivating spiel and a suitcase full of questionable powders, they held the keys to nature's more unconventional remedies. And trust me, they weren't always aiming for a pleasant buzz. Their goal was often cure or kill with very little in between, and a healthy dose of "we'll see what God wills." Precision dosing was a foreign concept, much like universal literacy or indoor plumbing. It was more about intuition, tradition, and perhaps a bit of prayer. Imagine the conversation, delivered in hushed tones, perhaps through a grimy curtain that barely conceals the shelves lined with bizarre concoctions. "Good morrow, purveyor of potions. I seek solace from the torment of my existence. My back aches from the ceaseless ploughing. My spirit is low after last week's famine, and the bishop fined me for humming too loudly during Mass, claiming it was a demonic incantation." And they'd squint at you from the shadows, perhaps their eyes clouded by fumes or a lifetime of dubious concoctions, then perhaps hand you a small, grimy pouch filled with suspicious dried leaves and twigs and say, in a gravelly, knowing voice, "For you, my friend, a draught to make the demons dance, or perhaps simply to make you stop feeling anything at all." And you just have to trust them. After all, what else were you going to do? Complain to HR about the lack of safety regulations? Write a scathing Yelp review that no one could read? No, you take your questionable package, offer your few precious coins, and hope for the best. Sometimes that meant hoping to simply wake up in your own bed, perhaps with a slightly lighter purse and a very upset stomach. Other times it meant hoping to wake up as someone else entirely, perhaps a prosperous merchant or a noble lady, free from the stench and toil, or perhaps somewhere else entirely, a place described only in whispered legends. The very act of entering such a place was a gamble, a step into the unknown, where the line between healing and hexing, between divine intervention and diabolical trickery, was as thin as a cobweb, and often crossed with alarming ease. You were putting your body, your mind, and potentially your immortal soul into the hands of someone whose understanding of medicine was often based on ancient superstitions and the unpredictable power of nature. The botanical bad trips, a perilous perambulation through the Garden of Madness. Our first real stop on this express train to Crazy Town, the kind of journey you definitely don't want to book again, is the sinisterly beautiful Deadly Nightshade, or Atropa Belladonna. Doesn't that name just roll off the tongue, hinting at gothic romance and forbidden desires, like something out of a medieval romance novel where everyone dies dramatically? Sounds romantic, right? Like a tragic heroine in a medieval ballad, beautiful but lethal? Wrong. This unassuming beauty, with its dark, gleaming berries that resemble tiny jewels and lush green leaves, was packing some serious psychoactive punch, derived from potent alkaloids like atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine. These compounds act as anticholinergics, blocking certain neurotransmitters in the brain, leading to a profound disruption of normal mental function. A few berries ingested, a leaf chewed, or even merely touching the plant and then rubbing your eyes, and you're looking at a cascade of horrifying symptoms, a rapid, pounding heartbeat that feels like a war drum in your chest, pupils dilated to saucers allowing too much light in, blurred vision so severe you might as well be blind, intense and vivid hallucinations, extreme delirium, and even violent convulsions. You're not just seeing things, you are the things. You might see shimmering castles in the clouds made of spun sugar and starlight, or legions of mischievous imps meticulously dancing the jig on your ceiling, perhaps even attempting to draw your family crest with mud on your hovel walls, all while chanting nonsensical rhymes that echo in your skull. More likely, you're experiencing vivid, terrifying nightmares while fully awake, consumed by a profound sense of paranoia and disorientation. You might be convinced you're naked, running screaming through a muddy field, perhaps babbling about demonic pacts and celestial prophecies, and utterly convinced you're a badger on a spiritual quest to unearth the meaning of life, which, let's be honest, would probably be just as confusing and depressing in medieval times as it is today. Fun times, if fun means a terrifying psychosis that might end in cardiac arrest, or being dragged to the village square and burned at the stake for witchcraft after being found muttering obscenities to farm animals. And remember, there's no immediate care here, no emergency room or toxicology unit. If you start barking at the moon, foaming at the mouth, or speaking in tongues in a language no one understands, which is probably just gibberish, but who's to say for sure when dealing with the devil's influence? They might just decide you're possessed by a particularly unruly demon and call for an immediate exorcism, which frankly might be more unpleasant than the high itself, depending on your priest's enthusiasm for torment and his proficiency with holy water, blessed relics and painful incantations. Your delirium might even be interpreted as confirmation of demonic possession, sealing your unfortunate fate. Then there's henbane, or Hyoscyamus niger. This unassuming little plant, often found unceremoniously growing in ditches and waste grounds, was a real overachiever in the world of medieval mind alteration. It contains similar tropane alkaloids to belladonna, though often in different proportions, leading to a slightly varied but no less harrowing experience. It was frequently used as a crude sleeping aid, because who needs peaceful sleep when you can hallucinate demons, or better yet, engage in lively debates with talking turnips about the merits of crop rotation, right? But it could also give you a delightful sensation of flying, or, profound paralysis, intense dizziness, a sensation of profound weightlessness, as if your very soul was detaching from your body and floating up to the thatched roof, perhaps to commune with the spiders and the forgotten ancestors. It was a common ingredient in medieval anesthetics, though anesthetic might be a generous term here. It was more of a delirium-inducing sedative. Imagine being operated on for a broken bone or a festering wound, perhaps a particularly nasty splinter that turned septic and required amputation, while experiencing vivid, terrifying dreams and being completely unable to move or speak, trapped within your own mind as a crude, rusty saw approaches your limb, or a cauterizing iron glows red hot, its heat radiating towards you. A medieval panic attack on steroids, folks, with a distinct possibility of dying from shock, infection, or sheer terror, long before the hallucinatory part even became a primary concern. The line between being healed and being eternally traumatized or outright killed was incredibly fine, a tightrope walked by both the patient and the healer, where the margin for error was non-existent. And let's not forget the granddaddy of them all, the infamous mandrake root, Mandragora officinarum. This plant held almost mythical status, whispered about in hushed tones in taverns and market squares, a legend born from its uncanny resemblance to a human figure. Shaped vaguely like a human, with forking roots that truly did resemble little bodies, complete with rudimentary limbs, it was rumoured to scream when pulled from the ground, a sound that would supposedly kill you on the spot or drive you mad with terror. So, first challenge, harvest it without instantly dying. Legend had it you'd tie a starving dog to it, and the dog's desperate struggle and death scream would be the one to release the root's grip on the earth, allowing you to collect it safely, albeit with a dead dog on your conscience. Morbid, utterly horrifying, and deeply unethical by modern standards, but practical, I suppose, if you had a surplus of dogs you didn't mind sacrificing for your esoteric botanical needs and believed in such omens. If you managed to acquire this mythical root, perhaps from a shady dealer at the village fair who claimed to have a death-proof method involving earplugs made of raven feathers and a very large sacred shovel, You'd then get a potent hallucinogen that causes intense visions, a profound feeling of unreality, and a complete loss of touch with your rather grim reality. Mandrake, like belladonna and henbane, contains tropane alkaloids, leading to similar anticholinergic effects, but often with a more profound sense of disorientation and dissociation. Imagine, you ingest this stuff, perhaps brewed into a tea that tastes like bitter earth and ancient secrets, or mixed into a paste for external application, and suddenly your scrawny, flea-bitten pig looks like it's wearing a tiny crown and eloquently lecturing you on the philosophical implications of feudalism and the impending doom of the potato famine, which, of course, was still centuries away. But why let facts get in the way of a good hallucination when your mind is actively constructing new realities? Or the village idiot, usually only capable of grunting and occasionally stealing chickens, starts reciting entire passages of Shakespeare in perfect iambic pentameter, despite Shakespeare not being born for another 2 centuries, leaving you utterly baffled as to whether you're mad, he's a prophet, or you've simply stumbled into a temporal anomaly. Or, far more likely and far less amusing, you're convinced the rats in your straw bed are actually tiny, malevolent demons gnawing on your immortal soul, their eyes glinting in the darkness, and your neighbour's mangy cat, usually just interested in scratching itself and shedding fur, is a witch's familiar spying on your every move, reporting back to its dark mistress about your unholy thoughts. Good luck explaining that to the priest when you finally come down from your metaphysical journey. He's already got his holy water, his book of exorcisms, and a very uncomfortable iron collar ready, just for you, and a surprisingly judgmental look on his face that clearly implies you deserved whatever demonic visions you experienced for dabbling in such forbidden remedies. The witch's brews and flying ointments, the gross and the gooey journey into nocturnal flight. But it wasn't just about munching on random plants, hoping for the best, or worst. Oh no, the medieval mind was far more creative, and frankly, a lot more disturbing. Enter the infamous flying ointments. Yes, those things witches supposedly rubbed on themselves before soaring through the night sky on broomsticks to join their dark Sabbaths, or maybe just to avoid the muddy, disease-ridden streets and the disapproving glares of their neighbours. The very idea sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it? The imagery of cackling hags anointing themselves under the pale moonlight is deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness, a potent mix of fear and forbidden fantasy. But for many, especially the outcast and the desperate, it wasn't about malevolence. It was a desperate, primal attempt to escape the drudgery, the pain, and the unyielding realities of their impoverished lives, to transcend the earthly and touch the ethereal, or at least believe they did. You're cold, you're damp, you're probably hungry, and you want to transcend this miserable existence, if only for an hour or two. Perhaps you've heard whispers of old women in the woods, or solitary figures on the edge of the village, who know how to unlock the secrets of the night, how to commune with unseen forces, how to slip the bonds of the physical world. So, with trepidation, you cautiously approach the local wise woman, or as the church might call her, the suspected witch, the very mention of whom could get you dragged before the local lord, or worse, burned at the stake. She eyes you shrewdly, her gaze piercing, her face lined with the wisdom of plants and perhaps a touch of madness. Then she hands you a small earthenware pot of greenish-black goo. The smell is indescribable. It's like rotten eggs mixed with old socks that have seen better centuries, stale breath, a hint of desperation, and perhaps a dash of bat guano or toad secretions for good measure. A truly pungent bouquet of dread and ancient dangerous herbal knowledge, a scent that seems to cling to your very soul. You hesitate, your stomach churning, your rational mind screaming in protest. But your craving for escape overrides your gag reflex and your innate sense of self-preservation. You hesitantly rub it on your skin, perhaps on your armpits, your temples, or, as some notorious texts from later witch trials suggest, on more intimate areas, which supposedly enhance the flying sensation by allowing more direct absorption into the bloodstream, bypassing the digestive system's protective barriers. Immediately, a burning sensation spreads across your skin, then a chilling cold, then a profound numbness, a creeping detachment from your physical form. You feel light, unburdened, as if gravity itself is loosening its grip. The concoction often contained a terrifying cocktail of ingredients: belladonna, henbane, datura, also known as Jimson weed or thornapple, another potent hallucinogen causing intense delirium and visions, aconite, or monkshood, deadly in even small doses, leading to cardiac arrest and respiratory failure, yet somehow believed to contribute to the flying sensation, and terrifyingly, animal fat. Yes, animal fat, rendered down from pigs, goats, or even sometimes human cadavers, though this was more rumour than common practice, thankfully, a sensationalist detail added by accusers, made the mixture absorbable through the skin, allowing for a transdermal delivery of these potent alkaloids directly into your bloodstream with unpredictable speed and intensity, because nothing says magical journey like a bit of rendered pig grease, or, if you believed the sensationalist propaganda of the witch hunters and torturers, the fat of an unbaptized child, though that's more in the realm of fear-mongering and less actual recipe, thankfully. But it paints a grim picture of the anxieties and dark beliefs of the age. Now, were they actually flying? Highly unlikely unless you count a vivid, profound hallucination of being airborne as flying. More likely, they were experiencing extreme delirium, a distorted body image. The sensation of shrinking or elongating limbs was common, a truly unsettling experience, and a terrifying sense of falling or floating uncontrollably, perhaps spinning wildly through a perceived void or tumbling endlessly through the stars. Imagine the psychological terror of feeling your body lift and spin, to be utterly unable to control it, hurtling through an imagined landscape of devils or angels. Imagine waking up hours later, perhaps disoriented and bruised in a muddy ditch by the forest's edge, covered in this foul-smelling grease, your clothes askew, perhaps a few teeth missing from grinding your jaw, with an inexplicable craving for acorns and a profound conviction that you just had a rendezvous with a goblin king who demanded you dance the jig, or perhaps signed a demonic contract in your own blood, or perhaps even consorted with succubi and incubi, their ghostly forms lingering in your memory. The hangover would be brutal, a pounding headache combined with profound nausea, extreme disorientation, and a lingering sense of unreality that blurred the lines between dream and waking. The shame, eternal, if you were even coherent enough to feel it. And the villagers, well, they'd probably already spotted you muttering to yourself in the field, half naked, covered in foul-smelling goop, and decided you were definitely in league with the devil, or at least a very messy drunk who had a disturbing encounter with a badger and lost a bet. Good luck explaining that to the local priest and his zealous inquisitors. They'd have the ducking stool and the kindling ready for you by sunset, and a crowd eager for entertainment and reassurance that divine order was being upheld. These ointments illustrate a fascinating point. The perceived experience was so powerful, so real, that it fueled centuries of folklore and belief in witchcraft. It wasn't just stories. People genuinely believed they had flown, transformed into animals, communed with spirits, or attended otherworldly gatherings. Their bodies and minds, under the influence of these potent, dangerous compounds, truly told them they had. The hallucinations were so vivid and immersive that they became indistinguishable from reality, cementing beliefs that would lead to countless tragic trials and executions across Europe, a dark chapter in human history fueled, in part, by misunderstood pharmacology and deeply entrenched fears. Opium and the monk's secret stash, the softer side of substance use in a hard world. Now, not everything was a one-way ticket to Nightmareville, or a public accusation of devilry leading to a rather unpleasant execution. There was a more gentle escape, if you will, the kind of high that didn't involve conversations with imaginary badgers or questionable anointing, but rather a quiet, almost sacred reprieve from pain and the relentless weight of existence. I'm talking about opium. Yes, the same stuff that got many a Victorian poet into trouble, inspiring epic poems and tragic lives, and still causes significant issues today. But in medieval times, before the mass industrialization of pharmaceuticals, opium was widely known as poppy juice, or tears of the poppy. It was cultivated and harvested, especially in the Near East and parts of Asia, but its medicinal properties were well understood and utilized across Europe, reaching even the furthest corners of our continent, including the monasteries of Romania, where monks often served as the primary healers. It was prized for its pain-relieving properties, its ability to induce profound sleep, and, naturally, its capacity to make you feel rather floaty, blissful, and utterly detached from the harsh realities of your existence. You've got a toothache so bad you're convinced a demon is nesting in your molar, gnawing away at your sanity with tiny ethereal chisels, making you wish for the sweet release of death itself. Or perhaps you're a monk, tired of endless chanting, rigid monastic discipline, the gnawing cold of the cloister in winter, and bland gruel that tastes suspiciously like boiled leather and existential despair, your spiritual journey punctuated by constant physical discomfort. You've heard whispers of the sleepy plant from travelling merchants who pass through your monastery gates, or from fellow monks who've seen service in more exotic lands during the Crusades, bringing back strange knowledge of Eastern remedies. A small dose of opium, often in the form of laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, a preparation often attributed to Paracelsus much later, but simpler water infusions of poppy heads and sap were certainly common, perhaps even dried and smoked in pipes. And suddenly, the monotonous chanting of matins or vespers sounds like a heavenly choir, each note a balm to your weary soul, swelling with an unexpected beauty. The bland gruel tastes like manna from heaven, or at least something tolerable and perhaps even mildly delicious, a feast for the senses in your altered state. And that pesky demon in your tooth decides to take a much-needed vacation to the land of blissful oblivion, leaving you in a state of serene calm, a peace you haven't known in years. Opium was widely accepted in medieval medicine, a valuable component of the limited pharmacopoeia available. It was a precious commodity, often reserved for those who could afford it, or those whose suffering was deemed most dire, like dying lords or wounded knights returning from battle, or even used in crude surgical procedures to dull the agony. It was found in monasteries, aristocratic households, and apothecaries alike, passed down through texts and oral tradition. It was used for everything from treating insomnia and calming agitated patients to alleviating the agonizing pain of childbirth, battle wounds, or terminal illnesses like the plague, offering a rare moment of peace in a world where pain was an inescapable constant. But let's be real, a weary monk after a particularly trying day, perhaps having spent hours illuminating manuscripts by candlelight until his eyes ached, enduring a particularly lengthy sermon from a droning abbot, or simply grappling with the profound loneliness and spiritual anxieties of his vows, might have found more than just pain relief in its milky embrace. It offered a profound sense of peace, a quiet detachment from the relentless harshness and spiritual anxieties of medieval life, and a serene, dreamlike state, often accompanied by vivid, pleasant dreams. It was a truly rare commodity, a reliable escape from suffering, in an age defined by hardship, disease, and constant struggle. It offered not a chaotic trip, but a serene, if fleeting, escape, albeit with all the risks of addiction, dependency, and accidental overdose that come with opiates, risks they couldn't possibly understand with their limited medical knowledge. Medieval people may not have understood the pharmacology, the complex chemical interactions within the brain, or the long-term effects of addiction, but they certainly understood the escape, the blessed relief it provided, and for many, that was all that mattered. The pursuit of even a temporary peace in a world so often devoid of it was a powerful motivator, a testament to the human spirit's yearning for solace in the face of insurmountable suffering. It provided a glimpse of heaven, or at least a temporary reprieve from hell. Accidental trips, the terrors of ergot and the dancing plague. But not all medieval highs were intentional, sought out in dark apothecaries or quiet monasteries. Sometimes the trip came to you, whether you wanted it or not, creeping insidiously into your very sustenance, a silent, fungal assassin waiting in your daily bread. And often it came with agonizing pain, grotesque disfigurement, and mass hysteria that swept through entire communities, turning festive gatherings into scenes of collective, horrifying madness. I'm talking about ergot. Imagine this. You're just trying to eat your daily rye bread, the coarse, dark staple of your meagre diet, perhaps the only thing standing between you and starvation. It's often gritty from the rudimentary grinding stone, sometimes even mixed with undesirable plant matter, and it's likely your main source of calories, providing the raw fuel for your endless days of toil in the fields. But unbeknownst to you, the rye grain from which your bread was baked is infected with a parasitic fungus, Claviceps purpurea, commonly known as ergot. This insidious fungus, a purplish-black growth that resembles a rat's dropping or a miniature raven's claw, thrives in damp, cool conditions, often appearing after a wet harvest season, when grain is improperly dried or stored in dark, damp granaries. It's a natural source of potent psychoactive alkaloids, including lysergic acid derivatives, the chemical precursors to LSD, long before anyone even conceived of synthetic psychedelics. You eat the bread, perhaps feeling a strange tingling in your mouth, a subtle unease, a slight metallic aftertaste, or a burning sensation. Then slowly, terrifyingly, your limbs start twitching uncontrollably. Then your neighbour's limbs start twitching. Soon, the entire village is dancing, not with joy or revelry, but with agonizing spasms, screaming in terror, foaming at the mouth, writhing on the ground, consumed by an invisible force that compels them to move relentlessly. They're convinced they're being pursued by invisible demons, or that a searing internal fire is consuming their very souls, burning them from the inside out, turning their blood to molten lead. This wasn't a party, folks. This was St. Anthony's fire, or ergotism, a nightmare made real by a microscopic adversary. The symptoms were horrific and multifaceted, often leading to gruesome outcomes that medieval doctors could only attribute to divine punishment or demonic possession. The alkaloids in ergot cause severe vasoconstriction, meaning your blood vessels narrow dramatically, cutting off blood supply to the extremities. This leads to excruciating burning pain in the limbs, a sensation of fire coursing through your veins, as if hot coals were laid on your skin, followed by numbness, tingling, and eventually dry gangrene, where the affected limbs turn black, shrivel, and literally fall off, often without any other external injury. Imagine the sheer horror of waking to find your fingers or toes simply detached from your body, lying next to you, a chilling testament to the unseen poison within, leaving you disfigured and dependent on others for survival. Simultaneously, the psychoactive properties induce intense seizures, violent convulsions, profound delirium, extreme paranoia, and vivid, often terrifying hallucinations. People would tear at their own flesh, shriek in terror, babble incoherently, and be consumed by mass hysteria that would spread like wildfire through a community that lacked any understanding of germ theory or toxicology. Entire villages could succumb to this agonizing collective madness, with few surviving unscathed. The infamous dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg, France, is one of the most chilling and well-documented examples of this devastating affliction. It began with a single woman named Frau Trophea, who simply began to dance uncontrollably in the street, for no apparent reason other than an irresistible, agonizing compulsion that seized her body. Within days, dozens joined her. Within weeks, hundreds were caught in this horrifying epidemic of movement, a macabre ballet of involuntary spasms. They danced themselves to exhaustion, collapse, and even death from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer physical collapse, all under the scorching summer sun, their feet bloody and torn, their bodies racked with unbearable cramps. The local authorities, utterly bewildered by this inexplicable phenomenon, and believing it was a hot blood disease that needed to be expelled through physical exertion, actually encouraged the dancing. They set up stages, provided food, and even hired musicians to keep the afflicted moving, mistakenly thinking it would cure the affliction. Imagine that. Your city's official response to a mass psychological and physical breakdown is to provide a sound system for a forced, agonizing rave that's literally killing people in front of your eyes. It sounds utterly absurd to us, a scene plucked from a dark comedy, but for them it was a very real, very terrifying event, a collective madness that consumed an entire community, turning a city into a living theatre of human suffering and death. It is widely believed that this was a mass outbreak of ergotism, a horrifying accidental high that turned an entire city into a living nightmare, where the very bread meant to sustain life brought instead a terrifying, dance-driven death, a grim reminder of how precarious life was when nature's subtle poisons were misunderstood. So, next time you complain about your gluten intolerance, or even a bad batch of artisanal rye bread from the local market, remember, at least your bread isn't trying to make you dance yourself into an early grave while seeing shadowy figures whispering terrible secrets from the corners of your mind, a fate far worse than any modern food poisoning or allergic reaction. The medieval mindset, belief, superstition, and the unseen forces that guided their trips. It's crucial to fully grasp the medieval mindset when considering these highs. This was a world utterly steeped in superstition, deep religious belief, and a profound lack of scientific understanding regarding the natural world and human physiology. The universe was not a predictable machine operating on discoverable laws. It was a vast, mysterious tapestry woven with divine will, demonic influence, and the subtle, often malevolent energies of the cosmos. Every unexplained event, every illness, every strange sensation was attributed to supernatural forces. When someone experienced a powerful hallucination, they didn't think, "Oh, perhaps I've ingested a psychoactive alkaloid that's messing with my neurotransmitters and causing a temporary disruption in my perception." No, that kind of logical scientific thinking was centuries away, confined to the distant whispers of future enlightenment. Instead, they interpreted these experiences through the immediate, visceral lens of their worldview, a worldview where magic was real, miracles were commonplace, and the devil was a very tangible, active presence in daily life, constantly seeking to ensnare human souls. If you soared through the night on a flying ointment, it wasn't a hallucination. It was a genuine out-of-body experience, a spiritual journey, and a terrifying confirmation that you had indeed communed with dark forces, perhaps even flown to a witch's sabbath in a secluded forest clearing, where unholy rituals took place under the watchful eye of the devil himself. The sensory experience was so compelling, so visceral, that it confirmed existing beliefs, cementing them deeper into the psyche and solidifying the narratives of witchcraft and demonic pacts. If you saw monstrous beasts after ingesting belladonna, they were not mere figments of your imagination. They were real demons actively trying to snatch your soul, whispering temptations or threats into your ear, urging you towards damnation or dragging you into the pits of hell. This belief system undoubtedly amplified the psychological impact of these substances, making the trip far more profound, terrifying, and existentially significant than a modern person might experience, even with the exact same compounds. The very air, the very shadows, the very rustling of leaves in the wind were alive with spirits, both good and evil, and a trip on a medieval hallucinogen simply ripped the veil away, exposing a reality they already believed existed, making it terrifyingly manifest and undeniable. There was no scientific explanation to ground them, no rational framework to dismiss the visions as mere chemical reactions, no concept of brain chemistry. Every altered perception was a sign, a message, a divine revelation, a demonic torment, or a confrontation with the divine or the demonic, a struggle for one's eternal fate. This added a layer of profound psychological weight to every experience, turning what might be a fleeting discomfort today into a terrifying battle for one's immortal soul, often played out in the horrifying privacy of their own minds, but with very public and often fatal consequences. The Church actively combated such deviations, seeking to explain them through theology or eradicate them through brutal suppression. This inherent framework of belief meant that for medieval people, the high wasn't just a physical or mental alteration, but a direct encounter with the forces of good and evil that shaped their entire cosmos. Conclusion: a farewell to medieval mindbenders and a reflection on modern comforts. So, there you have it, noble listeners. a deep dive into the fascinating, frightening, and often grim world of getting high in medieval times. It wasn't exactly a chill evening with your buddies, a bag of chips, and some questionable streaming content. It was a terrifying, unpredictable, and often dangerous gamble with your sanity, your physical well-being, and potentially your immortal soul. From running naked through fields convinced you're a badger on a divine mission, to dancing uncontrollably until your feet bled from a rogue fungus consuming your very flesh, to having a surprisingly chill time thanks to a monk's secret stash of poppy juice. The medieval experience of altered states was wild, messy, and utterly fascinating. It speaks volumes about humanity's enduring desire for altered consciousness, even when the means to achieve it were perilous, misunderstood, and laden with the risk of eternal damnation. It makes you appreciate modern pharmacology, doesn't it? Or at least the fact that your biggest concern after a bad trip is usually just an empty fridge, a mild existential crisis, and the lingering regret of that awful karaoke performance from last night. Our medieval ancestors didn't have the luxury of calling an Uber to escape a terrifying hallucination, or ordering a pizza when the munchies hit, or seeking professional help for their psychological distress. They just had to ride it out, often alone, often in a world that already felt like a perpetual bad trip, even without the hallucinogenic bread or the demonic visions induced by belladonna. They simply endured, and perhaps occasionally glimpsed another, stranger reality that confirmed their deepest fears or most fervent hopes, and then they woke up to the same hard life, perhaps a little more scarred, a little more pious, or a little more insane. Their attempts to alter their consciousness reveal not only a universal human drive, but also the immense gap in understanding between their world and ours. What do you guys think? If you lived in the Middle Ages facing the grim realities of daily life, the constant threat of plague, famine, and arbitrary feudal lords, would you have dared to try any of these medieval mind-benders? Perhaps for a nagging toothache, for a divine vision to guide your path, or just for a moment's blessed escape from the sheer grind and drudgery of daily life? Let me know in the comments below. Have you heard any other bizarre medieval remedies or fascinating tales of altered states from this dark and curious period? Share them, and if you enjoyed this hour-plus journey into the bizarre and often gross history of getting high, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your equally disturbed friends, and subscribe for more historical deep dives that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. May your bread be free of fungi and your dreams be free of dancing demons. And remember, sometimes the best way to get high is just a good, long sleep, preferably one that doesn't involve witches' ointments or spontaneous, deadly choreography.